Welcome to Rewitched, a charmed 1998 rewatch podcast. Join us on our journey as we recap, examine, and critique the series episode by episode from the beginning.
We'll be keeping our podcast spoiler free, so we welcome fans new and old to join us in watching and reflecting on one of our favorite shows. Currently, we're on season 2,
I'm your host, Jess Sabanko.
and I'm your host, Mia Sabenko.
Now let's get into this week's episode.
This week, we're discussing Season 2, Episode 12, Awakened. It originally aired on February 3rd, 2000, and had 4.78 million viewers, over 2.5 million less than the previous week.
I guess people hated Reckless Abandon because they stopped watching.
I know, seriously, they noticed all the flaws. It's so weird the way it fluctuates. Like, we get like 7 million down to 4 million, just then up and down.
Yeah,
It's weird.
it is.
I mean, that's still a lot. That's still a lot of people.
All right. So we open at P3 and it's late at night and the club is very busy. Piper's behind the bar and she's like cutting up a fruit and she keeps coughing. Phoebe comes down the stairs and walks up to her. Piper is like so happy to see her and Phoebe says, "Is that because I can work tonight or is it because I am now Phoebe Hallowell, college student?" And Piper's like, "Okay, neat thin slices." And then she's like, "Wait, you enrolled?" And Phoebe says that she signed up for 2 general courses. And then Piper notices that she also signed up for 7 electives. And Phoebe's like, "So I'm a little confused. What do you think I should take?" And Piper starts coughing again, and Phoebe's concerned about her. Piper also canceled lunch with Prue because she had to do paperwork for the club. And Piper said, or Phoebe says, "So I guess you missed your massage today also." And Piper says that a reporter from the San Francisco Weekly called and had a ton of questions about the club. And Phoebe tells her that she has to take care of herself. She's like, "You've been feeling funky since yesterday." And Piper says it's probably just a little bug. And Phoebe says, "Even more reason for you not to push it." Piper says she's fine and that the club is finally making money. And then she's like telling Phoebe again to slice the fruit. And Phoebe asks what type of fruit it is. Piper tells her that it's Kiwano, it's from South America. She says it's really great for Mai Tais and that she got it in yesterday. The bartender has a connection at the docks, and Phoebe's like, "Wait, you smuggled it in?" And she's like, "It's fruit, not drugs, Phoebe." Phoebe says, "Just because we're witches doesn't mean that you're invincible. You need to start taking care of yourself." And Piper's like, "Thank you, doctor." And Phoebe's like, "Hey, Dr. Phoebe Hallowell, I like it." And Piper laughs, and so does Phoebe. And that's the end of that scene.
Cute little intro scene. I mean, you can see Piper is clearly overwhelmed. Phoebe now officially enrolled in college. Like, she's been talking about this since even last season. She had said something about, maybe I want to start working again or go back to school. I'm excited for her. Like, I think this is great. It shows such a development in character, and I'm so excited to see like what happens to her from this.
Yeah, me too. And, I like the way that she's kind of still figuring out what it is she wants to do. She just knows she wants to be back in school. I think that's realistic. I think it's cute.
Mhm.
I like their interactions here, very sisterly. And I like the little setup. Like, I just think it's cute. I think it's funny. The scene works well for me.
Yeah, me too. All around very good. Okay, so now we are at Buckland's, and Jack and Prue are looking at a painting, and Prue says, "Well, it certainly appears to be a Monet," and continues to talk about it, and then Jack is just kind of teasing her as she continues to point things out, and she says it's beautifully rendered, and Jack is looking at her ass and is like, "No complaints about my view either." And then she's like, "Okay, you know what? Is everything with you sexual?" And he says, "No." "Okay, you've never thought about me?" And she's like, "Jack, come on, we don't have very much time to authenticate this painting." And he's like, "Not even just a little?" She's like, "Okay, fine, maybe just a little." And he says he's not pushing it, he just wants to know where he stands with her. And then Caldwell walks in and asks how they're doing, and she says they're exactly where they should be at the moment. He says he wants it authenticated by the auction, and he has 8 buyers interested. And she says, "You don't have to worry about us, Mr. Caldwell," and then he leaves. And Jack says, "Do I have to worry about us?" And Prue kind of just sighs. I'm getting kind of that vibe of very much like Prue is not that interested in Jack that way, like like it seems like for her this is nothing serious, like a roll with the punches kind of thing. And Jack's kind of in the same place, but also a little more pushy about the relationship. But I also don't know if it's just because like he wants to have sex and she still hasn't. You know what I mean? So I'm kind of wondering what's going through his head.
Yeah, me too.
But aside from that, just kind of setting up uh what is it called? A B plot or something?
Yeah, exactly. Like setting up their little side plot where we have this painting, which is kind of mirroring things in their relationship, which we'll see continue to happen through the end of the episode.
Exactly.
So then we're back at P3, and Phoebe is telling Piper to go home because she's sick. And Piper is worried that they're over their occupancy limit. She's like freaking out because she thinks the fire marshal might shut them down. Then she says she's fine, but then we like go into her point of view and like we see that everything's getting blurry. And then she says, maybe you're right, and passes out. And Phoebe tells someone to call 911 and she keeps trying to wake up Piper. And obviously now Phoebe's super freaked out, and that's the end of that scene.
So obviously this little sickness plays a part in this episode, and we'll see what happens there. Something's wrong with Piper. I'm interested to find out what it is, but aside from that, I feel like there's not too much, you know. So then we have the theme song, and we go back into a hospital room. And Piper's sleeping in the hospital bed, and Prue walks up to her and looks sad. And then Piper wakes up, and Piper asks Prue what happened, and she tells her that she collapsed. And Piper says that must have been great for business, so what's wrong with me? And Prue tells her that they're waiting for results and that Piper needs to take the time to get better, whatever it is. And then Piper asks where Phoebe is. And we see Phoebe in the nurse's station. It kind of changes to where she is. And she walks up to the desk and she's looking for Dr. Wallace for the results because they were supposed to be back 20 minutes ago. And then the nurse tells her that Piper was transferred to Dr. Williamson's care. She's going to page him and Phoebe should go to the waiting room. And she goes, but obviously looks pretty annoyed.
So then Phoebe's sitting in a chair and she looks upset, and this little boy wheels over to her and asks if she's sick too. She says, "No, I'm not sick." He says, "Then why do you look so sad?" She tells him that her sister's there and they don't know what's wrong with her. He says, "The doctors don't know what's wrong with me either. Maybe your sister and I have the same thing." She asks for his name and he says he's Nathan, and she introduces herself and then asks him about the toy he's holding. He tells her it's a ninja doll that he found in the children's ward, and she says, "I don't think it's just any ninja doll. If I know my ninja dolls, I think that one's really a magical wizard." And he's like, "Really? How can you tell?" And she tells him that he has powers. He can move things and freeze things, and he can kickbox too. And the really cool thing about him is he can do all this to the demon, to the bad guys inside your body without anyone even knowing about it. All you have to do is when you feel bad, you close your eyes and just picture him fighting them for you. Do you think you can do that? And he says he can, and they both smile. That's when Dr. Williamson comes over and she says bye to Nathan. And there are a bunch of interns with the doctor. And we find out that he's an infectious disease specialist. And Phoebe's obviously super upset, but she follows him as they walk towards Piper's room.
So I feel like that was really cute. You know, Phoebe's like trying to make the little boy feel better, and we see his like little toy that he's got, and it's working for me, you know, like Phoebe kind of playing back to the last episode where they're like, oh, you have that motherly instinct and things like that. So it's nice to see that from Phoebe. And then obviously understandably freaking out because why is there like an infectious disease specialist checking on Piper now? Like something must be really wrong, you know?
Yeah, totally agree with everything you said. Don't have anything to add.
Okay. So now we are in Piper's room and they all walk in and Piper asks where Dr. Wallace is and Williamson says, I'll be keeping him posted. How are you feeling? And Piper's like, okay, a little hot, tired. And his pager starts going off and he says, have you been out of the country recently? Africa, South America, Caribbean? She's like, I wish. No, I haven't even been out of the city. Why? And he tells her that she has a blood disease called Arroya fever, which comes from the bite of a sandfly. And he asked about imports into her home, and she's like, no, I haven't had any. And Phoebe reminds her of the fruit in the club, and he says that the Kiwanu is a possible carrier. And she shows him a bite on her shoulder from yesterday after she opened the fruit. And he orders an antibiotic, and then his pager goes off again, and he says that he's leaving to run some more tests. And Phoebe says, "Excuse me, she's gonna be okay, right? I mean, it's not life-threatening." And he says, "Well, I'll know better after I run some more tests." And he leaves, and she climbs up on the bed with Piper, and all the sisters smile at each other. And Piper says, like, "I'm gonna be okay." And Prue's like, "Yeah, I mean, he didn't seem too worried, just prescribed antibiotics." And Piper said, "The tests are just to confirm the diagnosis, I'm sure." Prue's like, "Yeah, don't you agree, Phoebe?" And Phoebe's like, "I think we should call Leo." Piper's like, um, "Why?" And Phoebe's like, "Why not? He can heal you." And Piper said, "No, he's out of our lives. He's not even our white lighter anymore. Besides, with Dan in my life." And Phoebe says, "But if Leo knew that you were sick," and Piper's like, "No, and that's final. No demon or warlock did this to me. Just let the doctors do their magic." She said, or Phoebe says, "Well, I just wanted you to get well soon." And she lays on her, and she's like, "I know, and I will. Now you two guys get out of here. Prue, go to Buckland's. Phoebe, go wherever it is you go to. And somebody please call Dan so he doesn't worry." Prue's like, "Okay, bye, love you." And she kisses Piper's forehead. Phoebe sits up and kisses her a bunch of times and like on the cheek and tells her like she loves her and goes too. And Piper's like laughing, and then after the door closes, she looks sad.
Yeah. So, I mean, this scene works. The medical stuff, not that I know much about medical, seems fine to me, like it works.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have the sister moment, and I have some questions. So, they're saying Leo's not their white lighter, which we kind of got when the last episode he was in. He was like, we're not going to work together anymore, whatever. And I will say, we said we were going to keep count of how many episodes it was before we saw Leo again. So we went episode 9 and 10 without seeing him. So it was only 2 episodes that he was technically gone. But anyway,
What about
if
11?
oh, and 11, yeah, my bad.
Yeah,
This is
he
12.
wasn't in the
Yeah.
last.
So
Yeah,
he
right.
wasn't in 9, 10, or 11. If he's not their white lighter anymore, why haven't they been assigned another white lighter?
I was thinking the same thing.
Like
Like you
someone
would think
should
that they would give them somebody else in place of Leo.
exactly, like someone should be here to help Piper right now. What the fuck? She's the charmed one. She's important.
Yeah, like it doesn't really make any sense, you know. And later on, as we well, I guess this would be more
Yeah,
of a
I'll have more
future
to say
thing.
about that later because like they were just gonna let Piper die, but we can get to that when we get to it.
Yeah, exactly. But you can see like how worried they all are. I think the sister moment was pretty cute, you know, like them all hugging her and Piper just trying to like be like, "Oh, don't worry, like everything's fine." And Prue, as much as you can tell, like she's like, "Yeah, yeah," agreeing with Piper, you can tell like she doesn't, she's concerned as well.
Yeah, like I think we see, and this makes sense as like an older sibling, like Prue and Piper are both trying to like put on a brave face for their sisters, whereas Phoebe, like as the baby, has more freedom to kind of like show that she's worried and like show
Yeah.
that fear and like, you know what I mean? Whereas like
Yeah, and you
Piper and
definitely
Prue
can
feel
see
this
that.
need to like protect and take care of. So that worked for me as well.
Exactly. It felt very realistic in that way.
Mm-hmm. All right. So then we're at Buckland's and Prue walks into her office and Jack is there. She's like, "Hey, have you had the chance to look at the thread density results on the Monet?" And he says, "Yeah, and you were right. There were some unexplained thread markings in the area around the station, as well as the signature." She asks if he told Caldwell. He says, "Not yet. I was hoping to talk you into going home first. Prue, you're exhausted." She says, "Yeah, I know, but I just prefer to stay here. Keep busy. I mean, how long can these tests take anyway?" And he tells her that Piper's going to be fine. And she says she knows it's just after everything I've seen in my life, and believe me, I've seen a lot of weird stuff. It takes a lot to scare me. But this time I'm really scared. And she's kind of like teary eyed, and they hug. And he says, I'm really not good at this saying the right thing stuff. Why don't you go back to the hospital and I'll stay here and handle everything, okay? And her phone starts ringing and she grabs it, and it's the nurse from the hospital.
Yeah, so I feel like here it was pretty considerate. Like Jack was like we saw still more of that sweet side of Jack. I mean, it does bring I mean, it does he does kind of go back to like like, oh, okay, when he's like, I don't really know what to say, so, but you should just go to the hospital and I'll take care of everything. Like, it's not exactly the most comforting, loving way to handle it, but he is being like pretty genuine and sweet there and like helpful to her. So it's kind of half and half. Yeah.
And it really, honestly, like, this is one of those scenes where Jack really works for me as a character because,
Hmm.
like, I get that sometimes it's hard to, like, put the way you're feeling into words and to, like, take care of someone else if that's not your natural instinct. So I
Right.
like the way that, like, his instinct is, let me do this for you, like, kind of like an act of service as opposed to, like,
Emotional
a,
support.
like, words
Yeah.
word supporting. So that works for me. And I see the way that he is like kind of using what he's capable to do to try to take care of Prue in this moment. Cause it does show that, despite what we were seeing in their last scene, like it's not just a sex thing with Jack. Like it's obvious
Yeah.
that on some level he really does care about her and that like he does want to support her and her family during this time.
No, I totally agree. And it definitely works for me. And him doing that as like an act of service, did feel like it fit with his character, you know?
Mhm.
Like if I had seen him just be all lovey-dovey and like there for her emotionally and things like talking to her, like it would have been nice, but also like it doesn't fit his character as well as this does, you know?
Yeah.
Like it definitely worked for me.
Yeah, and this is one of those moments where I think the writers are actually making good use of Jack's character. Like I did enjoy this
Agreed.
scene.
All right, so now we are at the manor and Dan and Phoebe walk in and Dan's like, is she gonna be okay? And Phoebe's like, that's what's so frustrating. They won't tell us anything, the damn doctors. And he's like, can I see her? Where is she? And she says San Francisco Memorial. Well, but she's obviously like looking down, really stressed and worried. So Dan comes and hugs Phoebe and tells her, like, hey, nothing's gonna happen to Piper. She's strong and healthy and she's a fighter. Phoebe's like, you've noticed too, have you? And they both laugh a little. And then the phone rings and Phoebe picks it up and it's Prue calling saying that they need her to get to the hospital right away. And she's like, why? What happened? And that's how that scene ends.
Mhm.
Which I just want to say that, like, sister and brother-in-law type like situation, like that was sweet, like we've had moments where it feels like, okay, you're being a little too close with like your sister's man or like it's weird, but
Yeah.
that didn't feel out of place at all, like it felt like they were comforting each other, caring about her, and it just felt like a really sweet moment. Like I really liked that scene.
Yeah, I did too. It wasn't anything that necessarily like added to anything, but it did feel like a sweet scene, like you're saying. It
Exactly.
felt like, them leaning on each other for support because they both love Piper so much. So it totally made sense to me.
Yeah, it was just like it wasn't a necessary scene, but I'm glad that it's there because it was cute and it made the situation feel a little more real and emotional, like realistic and everything. It worked for me.
Yeah, because I like kind of seeing that, when they're on their own, each of the sisters is kind of dealing with this moment in their own way. So it
Exactly.
works for me.
Definitely.
And then, of course, we get that idea at the end, which we got at the end of last season as well, that something's wrong with Piper and that we're going to find out what that is. So then we cut to the hospital, and the doctors are wheeling another patient through the hall. And as that's happening, Dan and Phoebe run past and up to Prue, who's by like the doorway to Piper's room. Phoebe asks what's going on, and Prue says all they said is that her condition has worsened. And inside the room, there are a bunch of nurses and doctors all around Piper. And Phoebe's like, what's that supposed to mean? And Dan says it means we're not going to leave the door until we find out. And the doctor walks over to them and says, unfortunately, your sister's immune system isn't as strong as we thought it would be. The antibiotics are having no effect on the disease. And Phoebe says, so what do you do now? And he says, well, there's nothing more we can do. And Prue says, wait, what do you mean by that? What are you saying? And he says, well, either Piper pulls out of the coma on her own, or I'm afraid your sister's not going to survive. And Phoebe starts crying, and Prue and Dan do too. And Piper's just like lying there in her oxygen mask. Like it's very dramatic. And
Shit got pretty real pretty quick.
I
Um,
feel like these doctors are way too fast to give up. Like you only tried one thing and you're just like, yeah, she's gonna die. Like
yeah,
RIP.
like it's all like, all right, we gave her an antibiotic, dude. It's up to her. Like, You just pay the bill, all right? And hopefully she pulls
Like,
through.
do you guys have insurance?
Yeah. Like honestly. Like it's gonna be about $4,000 for the oxygen mask and the antibiotics.
Literally. This is a healthy 27-year-old woman, but like honestly, we're giving up after one small
Yeah.
medication.
It obviously like she's screwed. There's nothing else to say. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Not that that's like exactly how things go, but it does like unfortunately feel pretty realistic in a lot of ways. Like first of all, the idea that like at any time something can happen and things can just go downhill really quickly, which is like always a scary thought, you know, like you could be sick, next thing you know you have like a fucking brain bleed or something. Like it's shit like that happens all the time and it's terrifying. So that feels realistic, like Piper getting really sick really fast. um and also kind of the way the doctors are like taking a while to get answers to them and this and that, and like it feels realistic. Like there are many times where I've gone to hospitals and it's like this is just pointless. Like I'm here for 7 hours and you guys have literally done some tests and nothing came of anything. You know, like
Yeah,
it's
I mean, to get personal a little bit, like when I first got sick last year, I mean, not that everyone who's a listener knows this, but I have like a stomach disease. And before I got diagnosed with that, like I was in the hospital for like a day and a half. And, it was just waiting for doctors to come in and tell me what was going on. And it sucked because this was also like there were still COVID restrictions. So I was by myself. Like it sucked really
yeah.
bad. And so, the waiting and all that makes sense to me. But the fact that, again, this is like a healthy 27-year-old woman and they're giving up after trying one thing, like that just feels like do
Yeah,
more. What the
that
fuck?
feels a little out of pocket, unrealistic, but I yeah, that's the whole like ideas of doctors being difficult and kind of not really solving anything is feels a little real to me for sure, you
Yeah,
know.
no, definitely. I mean, from when I got sick to like when they figured out what was wrong with me, it was like 4 months. You know what I mean? So, like, I
four
get
months
that
of
all that
constant
takes time.
4 months of constant appointments and them like
Mhm.
doing the same thing to tell you like, oh, you don't know what's going on, you know, like
Yeah. And
it
millions of
happens a lot.
tests and like dealing with insurance and all that. It's the American healthcare system and it sucks, but like,
Yeah,
you know,
this definitely kind of
but things
presents
can
that a little, but it
progress. And
is
like, we're kind of laughing at the drama of it because we just see Piper there in the oxygen mask, but
right.
like, it is scary and like things can happen like that. And we just want the doctors to do more. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, like do a little, I mean, just like in this one antibiotic, like not that we're expecting, oh, they can just heal her. Like we know doctors aren't magicians or anything, but like there's no
But
way you
like,
did the best you
try more
could.
than one thing.
I know, like give it like is that the only like cure? I mean, I don't know anything about Aurora fever, but I'm gonna have to like look it up and research like how they usually handle a situation like that because that's just crazy to me.
Because I feel like, oh, this antibiotic won't work. Let's try a different antibiotic. Let's
Yeah.
try 3 or 4 things before you're just like, yeah, either she wakes up from the coma or like you guys don't have a sister anymore. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
like sorry. There's nothing more we can do for you. So now we are at the manor in the attic, and Prue and Phoebe walk in, and Prue's like, okay, we can't let Piper die. And Phoebe's like, no, we can't, but Prue, this isn't a demon or a warlock that we're up against. And they reach for the Book of Shadows, and she's like, if there are spells in here to vanquish demons, then there's got to be a spell to vanquish a lousy bug. Phoebe's like, okay, but even if there is a spell, how do we get past the whole personal gain issue, the consequences? Prue's like, what consequences? The power of Thebe remains unbroken. Innocents are saved. I don't really see a downside to that, do you? She's like, Prue, if good witches could really vanquish diseases, do you think any like there would be one sick person in the world? And Prue's like, look, we have to save Piper. And she's like, I agree. All I'm saying is before we resort to the Book of Shadows, maybe we should call Leo. And Prue's like, no, she told us not to. And Phoebe's like, so let her be pissed at us. At least she'll be alive. And then she's like, Prue says, we don't even know how to contact him. He's always just sort of been around. And they both start kind of looking up and just yelling his name, like, Leo, Leo. And all of a sudden he orbs in. And like they're like, whoa, it worked. And Prue says, all right, look, Leo, Piper is very, and Leo says, very sick. I know. That's why I could hear you calling. I've been nearby watching. And Phoebe's pissed. She's like, wait, you've been watching her this whole time and you haven't healed her? And he says, I can't. They know about Piper too, and they won't let me interfere. I'm not even supposed to be here right now. And Prue says, Leo, you can't just let Piper die. And Leo says, don't you think I would do something if I could? Phoebe says, but you love her. And Leo said, I know, but I'm not her white lighter anymore. Even if I could help her, my powers probably wouldn't even work because she wasn't hurt fighting evil. And then he hears like that white lighter jingle noise, and he says, I have to go. They know I'm here. I'm sorry. Tell Piper I love her. And he orbs out. And Phoebe's like, screw the consequences. And they go over to the book.
So this is something I feel like we've seen before with the sisters, where like when it comes to protecting each other, they kind of throw away the idea of the consequences, which, as a sibling makes sense to me. So I get that. Let's talk about the Leo of it all though, because
I
like,
know, that's what I was thinking. Like, first of all, him coming, finally seeing him again, I'm loving it, and it's gonna develop into something else later in the episode, which I'm kind of excited about. But we'll get there. And I mean, it kind of sucks because it's like, he's broken the rules just being with Piper before. So like, kind of, why can't you do it now if you love her that much? But at the same time, you can see like his reasoning makes sense. And yeah, like she didn't get hurt fighting evil, so maybe he wouldn't be able to heal her. Although there have been times where she's still like he's still able to heal her when she gets hurt from like cutting herself on a knife by accident. Like, didn't that happen
yeah.
a couple episodes ago?
Mhm.
And it's like, well, that wasn't through fighting evil, so why wouldn't you be able to? But he does have to follow his rules, like he's got his job as well, so it kind of makes a little sense.
But also like, I totally get their point because it's like, what? They're just like, fuck Piper, let the power of three end.
Like, what's going through their head when they're like, oh, like we're just gonna let the power three die? No, you can't save them. What about another white lighter? Like you said, like why don't you send somebody else? Like, no, it's just like die. Like I don't get it.
And it's not like, I mean, spoiler to the end of the episode, but like, it's not like she's going to heal of natural causes. So they were literally just going to let her die.
Yeah, like in the at the end of the day, they never did anything or allowed anything that was gonna save her. Like they were fully prepared to just like, she's dead.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't
But
know. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I have so many questions about the destiny aspect of the show then, because like,
exactly.
clearly Piper's destiny was not to die, but like, they weren't going to do anything about it.
Yeah, and I have a feeling like, because I mean, as we continue to see more of them and Leo's bosses and everything throughout the show, they're pretty consistently like rule followers, like very much like we don't interfere with destiny. We don't interfere with like what people do. So it's I kind of get it, but at the same time, it's like, what are you there for? Like, if you're just like, oh, I know things are going to turn out this way, so let me leave it alone. It's like, but why are you even there then if you're not going to do anything? Or like, you know what? Like, it's just like there's so many questions that you have to like think about with this. And even Piper and Leo, like we heard in the Cupid episode, like, and I mean, it'll be continued at the show. Like, this is a broken rule. Like, Piper and Leo were not supposed to happen. And Cupid even said that. Like, no, we weren't supposed to do that? So it's like, was that destiny or was it like off track? Like, it's just very confusing to think about.
Yeah, and like it all, I mean, I guess we can get to it at the end, but then like it just makes me have more questions about the way the episode ends. Like,
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that when we are there, but I know, yeah, I know what you're saying. This is the first time. I mean, this is consistently through the future how they call Leo around, but this is the first time they like do the whole yelling his name thing. I didn't
yeah,
realize that that had never happened before.
me either. I forgot they didn't know how to get Leo to arrive, that he did always just kind of appear.
Yeah, I never really thought about it because we've seen the show so many times, like we already know that that's how they get his attention. But that's hilarious that season 2 is the first time we get to see them figure it out.
Exactly. Leo, Leo.
Leo.
Some are back at the hospital and we're in the hallway, and Phoebe says, you really think the awakening spell is going to work? And Prue says it better. She's gonna get Piper's blood, and Phoebe's gonna get a poppet, and they'll meet in Piper's room, so they split up. When we get to Piper's room, Dan is holding her hand and a nurse is taking her blood. Prue asks how she is, and Dan says there's no change. She uses her power to steal a vial of blood and put it in her pocket. And Dan says she just looks like she's sleeping, but I can't wake her up. And Prue kind of moves closer and rubs his shoulder and says she'll wake up, I promise. Then we cut over to Nathan's room, and Nathan is playing with the ninja doll when Phoebe comes in. And he's like, Phoebe, I was hoping you'd come back. And she's like, really? Why? He says, you were right. The wizard did it. I feel great, just like I used to. She says, the power of positive thinking. And he says, the power of magic. He says he can go home in a few days. And she says that she's so happy for him. And she's like, Nathan, I was wondering if you would let me borrow the wizard for a while. My sister can use a little magic right now. And he says that she can keep him. I don't need him anymore. And Phoebe thanks him and smiles. Then we go to Piper's room where Phoebe comes in and says she was going to get them sodas, but the machine in the hall is busted. Dan says he'll go look for a working one and leaves. Then Phoebe pulls out the ninja and places him on Piper's chest, and Prue pulls out the spell. In the hallway, Dr. Williamson passes by Dan and is coming towards the room. Back in Piper's room, Prue and Phoebe are casting the spell. The door starts to open, and Prue uses her power to close it and hold it closed. Dr. Williamson is like trying to get in and getting really pissed off as they finish the spell. Piper wakes up, and Dr. Williamson is yelling for them to open the door. He comes in and asks who's blocking the damn door, and the sisters are all hugging, and Prue's like, what's up, Doc? And he says, when did this happen? Miss Hallowell, are you feeling all right? And Phoebe's throwing out the doll just as the doctor's like examining Piper. And then in the trash, we see like the doll's eyes open. Then in the hall, Dan sees people going into Piper's room and like assuming there's something wrong. He goes running in and he looks so relieved when he sees her there. She asks if the sodas are for her and they hug. Then the doctor says, just this doesn't make any sense. The fever's gone, vitals are normal. I've never seen anything like it. And Phoebe and Prue are smiling, and Piper asks if she can go home after they take more blood and that she hates hospitals. They all start laughing and hug her, and Dr. Williamson is just staring at them. Then inside the trash, we see the doll sit up, and there's a nurse walking by, and he like stabs her with his sword. And she grabs her ankle for a second, but then just continues walking. And then he like slices open the trash bag and starts walking away.
So pretty long, like, little clips there, but I think all of this worked really well. I mean, first of all, the scene with Nathan, absolutely adorable, absolutely melted my heart. Like, that was so sweet. And for him to be like, no, like, you were right, they did it, I'm healed. And then for her to be like, my sister could use some of that magic right about now, and he like lets her it was just too cute. I couldn't even believe it. I love it.
It was very cute. Like, I loved the little connection between them.
Me too.
I feel like Dr.
Shit,
Williamson is too quick to be like all pissed off for no reason.
yeah, I know. Like, dude, relax. Like, how I've never heard a doctor walk in and be like, who's blocking this goddamn door? Like, you don't talk to like patients like that.
And also when he's like, this makes no sense, blah blah blah. Like, did you want her to die? Like, I feel like he was really like
ready to just let her go. Everybody
literally.
seems to be. Although I do have to say, like, the fact that there is zero logic behind what just happened, like, from his perspective, I can understand why he's like absolutely baffled and like wants to know what's going on and like lost. And as the episode continues on, like, it'll make more sense, like, because it just kind of progressively happens that way. The
Yeah, no,
doll.
I get
Oh,
him
sorry.
getting there, but I don't get him being there right in this first scene. Because, like, all he's
Right.
seeing is that she woke up. Like, maybe she just woke up from the coma.
Right. Like, they said that either she pulls out on her own or whatever, but I think it's kind of like, I think his confusion right now and being like, whoa, what the hell? Like, this makes no sense. Is like, yeah, she could have woken up, but she wouldn't have woken up from the coma and just like magically be healed. Like, he's over here checking her and everything's just gone? Like,
Yeah.
that's where I could totally understand him being like,
But, like,
this
I feel
makes
like
zero
he should have
sense.
started running tests before he said that. Like, if he had done her
Yeah,
blood
should have
work and he
checked.
was, like, doing, like, her, what is it when they like check your heartbeat and stuff. Like if he was checking all her stuff and seeing that it was coming back normal, then to start getting suspicious makes sense, but I feel like his suspicion starts too quickly.
Yeah, as soon as he walks in the door. Yeah, it didn't that was I think you're right.
But
Um
otherwise, the pacing was good. That's just the one element of it that felt off to me.
yeah, no, I definitely agree. So I love that, and I love like, with them all jumping on top of her and giving her love and everything, all very sweet. And this fucking little ninja, we don't know exactly like what that means, him stabbing the doctor, but we will find out more about it as we
Mhm.
go on.
Yeah. And like, it's interesting because we know something that the sisters don't yet. So that's what's
Yeah.
interesting about that aspect of the episode.
And you know
Like
what's
we can
weird?
already see the consequences, but they can't.
Yeah. And you know what's weird too is that I mean, it's not that much of a spoil, we're gonna get there, but they never find out.
That's true. They do never realize what was going on, like
They have
how
no
exactly the transmission was
Yeah,
happening.
like the way things played out, they never ended up like finding out that it was because of this little ninja. Actually,
Yeah.
they did say no because we'll get there, but yeah, no, they never realized that.
Yeah, they never realized that the poppet came to life.
Exactly. So that's kind of funny because we've known some like we know throughout the whole episode and they never even find out.
Yeah.
So now we are at P3. It's like, the next night or something, and the club is closed, and the sisters are still there, and like a little bit of staff. And Piper tells the bartender that he could go and she'll clean up. So he leaves. And Phoebe goes over to Dan and asks him to dance with her. And he's like, oh, it's 2 a.m. And he puts his arms around Piper. And Phoebe goes back to dance while Prue's kind of like up playing with the DJ and the music, like DJ booth and music. So Dan puts his arms around Piper, and Piper's like, somebody need a nap. And he's like, that's not fair. You've been asleep for almost 24 hours. And she says, and I know you've been up for almost 24 hours by my side. I can't tell you how much that means to me, you being there for me, hanging tough. And she strokes his face, and he's like, I wasn't that tough. And she laughs, and they start kissing, and she tells him to go home, and she'll see him tomorrow. And then he leaves, and Prue and Phoebe are like playing patty cake on the ground, and Phoebe or Piper goes up to them, and she's like, "Okay, spill. You guys cast a spell, didn't you?" And Prue's like, "Who, us?" And she's like, "Yeah, you. Not that I'm not grateful to be cured because I am, but what about that little personal gain problem?" And Phoebe's like, "Don't you think we would have seen any consequences by now? It's been hours." And Prue says, "Yeah, maybe saving a protector of the innocent isn't really considered personal gain." And Piper's like, maybe. Like I said, I'm not complaining. I'm just glad you didn't call Leo. Awkward. And they kind of like look at each other like, And then she was like, strange though, with all the demons we faced, this bug was the scariest one of all. Prue says, yeah, you don't have to convince us. And Piper says, I love you guys. And they all like group hug. And Prue says not to ever scare them like that again. And then Prue says, I almost forgot I have to get that Monet authenticated by tomorrow. And Phoebe's like, at this hour? And Prue's like, why not? I'm wide awake. And she runs off, and Piper decides to start cleaning up while Phoebe is dancing. And then Piper, like, all of a sudden, like, while Phoebe's watching her clean up, just starts moving at like ultra speed and cleaning everything. And Phoebe's like following her with her head. And then she's like, Piper. And like, Piper stops in front of her, and she's like, what? She's like, I think I found a consequence. And Piper looks confused. So I kind of like the way they had this play out. I mean, all of them, not like it's 2 a.m. Prue wanting to go do that. Like, none of them are tired. Dan, and I like that they kind of showed that contrast. Like, Dan wasn't in the room, so he's like exhausted, like being up this whole time, worried, going home and go to sleep. But like, Piper, Phoebe, and Prue are all like wide awake right now. But Piper's the one that's like zooming, literally bouncing off the walls. So,
Yeah. This scene, it works for me. It's really just setting up a lot of what we're going to see throughout, but
right.
it's a well-developed scene. The dialogue's quippy, like I like it.
Yeah, I agree. It was just like a fun little scene and a fun little way to show like the consequence or
Yeah.
a consequence.
Mhm. And the I'm wide awake. Yeah, because it's an awakening spell.
Exactly. Like I didn't realize it at first. I always thought like, oh, it's just it made Piper too awake and now that's why she's running around. But I guess if you think about it, like the other two were also pretty awake and they were because they were in the room during that spell, so It works that way for me.
Exactly. So then we're at the hospital and we see that the nurse who got stabbed is laying in a hospital bed and she's really sick. A doctor goes up to the phone and says to get Dr. Williamson. Then we cut to what I'm assuming is another part of the hospital. And Dr. Williamson answers the phone and he's like, okay, put them both on the antibiotic, though I doubt it will do any good. Call me if there's any changes. Then we see this man in a dark jacket approach him in the hallway. And he says, and what can the Center for Disease Control do for you this fine middle of the night, Dr. Williamson? He says, I've really got something for you this time, Siegler. I wouldn't have called you if I didn't. And he says, it's not very ethical to try and get the government to validate your findings just so you can get published, doctor. And he says, this will get me more than published. I've got an outbreak of Arroyo fever at this hospital. And Siegler says that's impossible. Arroyo fever isn't contagious. And Williamson says, it is now. I've got 3 patients with this disease in isolation. And he asks how they got it, and William says he doesn't know, but however they did has something to do with the first patient that came down with it, Piper Hallowell, and they keep walking.
So, kind of fucked up. Like, obviously, the way the Centers for Disease Control guy is talking to him, seems like Dr. Williamson is like been trying to up his career. And on top of him kind of giving up with Piper so easily, it does kind of feel like, okay, like you aren't even doing it for the people, like you're not even really trying to save lives. You just kind of more concerned about yourself and your career.
Yeah, like
That's what
he's
it's coming
too
across
ambitious
like.
for his own good.
Yeah. Like
Like
it's
he's
it's
kind of a doctor because he wants the glory more than he wants to actually help people.
right. And it kind of I mean we don't know for sure how he is, but like that's kind of the vibe that it's giving off. Like he didn't even deny the publishing thing. He was like, this will get me more than published. Like,
Mhm.
okay, asshole.
Yeah, like he's not coming across good. But at the same time, I mean, he is trying to help the patients, but like
Exactly.
it might be that like he's just too ambitious for his own good.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely agree. And so now we kind of know like that's what's going on. The ninja doll stabbing these patients is what's spreading the Arroyo fever. Obviously, the disease transferred over to the doll, basically,
Yeah, because of
and
Piper's
he's
blood
infecting
on it.
people.
Yeah. Mhm.
Exactly. And he's now infecting people. So makes sense. So now we are at Buckland's and it's like that morning. And Jack walks into his and Prue's office, and she's staring at the painting, and he asks how Piper is, and she says fully recovered, and he's like, "What? That's great." And she's like, "Yeah, I just came in early to confirm a few suspicions." And he's like, "Whoa, wait, back up. Piper's okay?" And she takes off her glasses and says, yes, she's home, she's okay, she's healthy, everything's back to normal. She's like, Jack, we've got to talk, seriously. And he says, okay. And she's like, we can't keep on fooling ourselves. This thing isn't real. I mean, I know that it looks perfect from the outside and it makes sense to just ignore the truth and pretend that there's nothing wrong, but I can't do that. And Jack's like, look, Prue, come on. I know we've had our difficulties and maybe our relationship isn't everything you'd hope for, but and Prue cuts him off and she's like, Jack, I'm talking about the painting. It's not real. I mean, yeah, it's from his school, but Monet didn't paint it. One of his students did. And he's like, oh, are you sure? And she's like, positive. He's like, so what? She's like, so what? He's like, Prue, if someone wants to believe in something that may not be altogether true, but is true enough for them, then what's the harm in letting it be? The world is made up of almost perfect. It's nothing but near misses and necessary compromises. In this case, I think we got a little bit of both. But you know what? That's okay. I kind of know how you feel. I'm just asking you to not look so close. Nothing bears up under that kind of scrutiny. And she doesn't look happy, and she's like, are you talking about the Monet? And he's like, yeah, that too. Just trust me, go with it. Everything's gonna be fine. And she looks at the painting again. So yeah, I see here them like kind of mirroring with the Monet and themselves, like their relationship. It kind of works though. Like I understand what they're each saying about each other too.
Yeah, like the subtext here is very clear. It's not at all like hidden.
Yeah, not very subtle.
But part of me feels like, and we can talk about this when we get to the very end of the episode, they're really rushing the end of Jack and Prue here. and just like creating problems out of thin air.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, not that these things aren't true, like they both think differently. She does kind of have a little like they different mindsets, whatever. Like the conversation makes sense, but at the same time, everything was like perfectly fine, happy the way things were, and now it's like the next episode they're all of a sudden just like having all these issues that came out of nowhere.
Exactly. It went from like, let's have fun for now to we're too fundamentally different and this has to end.
Yeah, like it didn't need to like if they had developed it more, it would have made more sense. But right now, it's like with the way that they've been handling the relationship, until now, it doesn't really add up.
I feel like we're not learning something new about Jack's character here. Like the first
No.
time we met Jack, he told that woman, like, oh, I'll give you $1,000 for it now. Like it's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. We
Yeah.
know that Jack has always been in this game for the money.
Right. Exactly.
And that
Nothing
he,
like
as he
new
admitted
here.
in the first episode, he has no problem lying.
Yeah. He made that very clear. And even so, he is like fairly honest when it comes to like he'll openly say how he feels about things, which I can respect that. But yeah, we're not really learning anything about Jack here. We're not really it does feel kind of rushed and sudden, although it does like make sense. Like this is like the point I was expecting it to eventually get to, but I didn't expect it to just kind of come out of nowhere like that after them literally in the last episode being like, "Oh, like let's just have fun." You
Yeah.
know?
Though I agree with Prue because Prue is someone who sees things in black and white, and as we'll find out later, like what's about to happen is the wrong thing. So I get Prue where Prue is going to come from in her decisions later on. So then we're at P3 and we see this hazmat van pull up outside and a bunch of people in suits get out. Then we see Siegler get out and put on a mask. And Phoebe and Prue are inside and the door opens and they all come rushing in. They have a court order to take them into custody and place the club in quarantine until further notice. He hands Piper the papers and she looks super pissed, and they're putting a bunch of stuff into plastic bags and moving all around.
It kind of sucks that like the government can do that at any point and there's just nothing you can do about it. I mean, it
I know.
makes sense in certain scenarios, but it does kind of feel like damn, that kind of really sucks that they can just do that.
Yeah, and I'm gonna have some like questions as we go on with like how this is allowed, but like we'll get there when we get there.
Yeah, agreed. So now we are back at the hospital outside, and a press conference is going on. Reporters are everywhere asking questions, and Dr. Williamson is saying that no, he wouldn't consider it an epidemic at this stage, but the CDC determines that. He says, all I can tell you is that an outbreak has occurred in the hospital, and we've taken all the necessary and responsible steps to contain it. We've identified the initial carrier, and we brought her and anyone she may have infected down to the isolation ward. And then they ask about P3 and they're like, is it true? Like they should shut down an establishment called P3. And he says that's a question best answered by Dr. Siegler, excuse me, and then he walks away. And at Dan's house, Dan is like sitting in the kitchen watching the news, and he hears about like them asking about P3 and like him confirming it, and Dan like gets up and grabs his jacket, obviously knowing something's going down.
Yeah. So I have a question. So here, Williamson is like, oh, we, contained her and anyone she might have been in contact with. Why didn't they contain Dan then?
Yeah,
He was so clearly fucking there at the hospital.
that's so weird. I didn't even think about that. Like they just took the sisters.
And like Prue's been at work all day. They didn't think that she might have come into contact with anyone at work.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense at all.
Like, come on, we've been through COVID. We know how quarantines work. This is
Yeah,
not
no, it's not.
good
It's not
contact
that
tracing.
simple. Aren't doing that great of a job.
Nope. So then we're at the hospital and we're like downstairs in this isolation ward, is what I called it. And Phoebe and Piper are locked in a room, and Phoebe's banging on the window trying to get the attention of like a doctor who's passing by. The woman presses the intercom. She's like, I'm sorry, we can't hear you. What is it that you want? And she's just being so nasty.
Mm-hmm.
And Phoebe's like, we want to get the hell out of here. That's what we want. She's like, Dr. Williamson will be right in to discuss the situation with you. And Piper's like, discuss what? I feel fine. And the woman repeats that he'll be right there and walks away. Phoebe's like, this is ridiculous. Why won't they tell us anything? Piper says they're lucky they're in the other room. I'd freeze their butts. And then the door opens and Prue's being walked in. And Piper says, you're obviously not here to get us out. And Prue says, yeah, no. When I got home, someone from the CDC was waiting for me and they took like a quart of blood. And Phoebe says, ditto. Piper says, well, they might as well have taken all of mine. They've shut down the club. They'll ruin it. I'll lose everything. Another one of Piper's big dramas, which I love.
I love it.
I love when she gets like that. It's like so relatable to me because that's
I
how I
know.
act too.
She's like, well, they may as well fucking kill me. Like,
I'm like mood, like
mad
me.
dramatic. I love it.
And then Phoebe's like, no, you won't. Once this whole thing gets straightened out, and Prue's like, I have a feeling it's not going to be that easy. Look, I overheard some doctors talking. There's others here that are infected with the disease. And Phoebe's like, but I thought it wasn't contagious. Prue says that she did too. And then she asks if they can hear them. And when Phoebe and Piper say no, she asks if either of them slept. And they realize that it's probably a consequence of the spell. And Prue says, I have a bad feeling that's not the only consequence. Then we cut to Nathan's room where a nurse and a doctor are in there and Nathan is asleep. And as the nurse walks out, we see the ninja walk in and look at Nathan.
Scary. Don't fuck with my boy Nathan.
I know, leave him alone. He's just a sweet little boy getting better.
I know, leave him out of this. So here I feel like they're trying to, or they're starting to make the connections a little more. Like Prue at least is starting to see like, okay, like we may have fucked up here. And it does kind of suck that like they're locked in there, like literally stuck, and nobody is even responding to them, telling them anything. Like that's so fucking miserable.
Yeah, also, why did they lock 3 people in a room that
I
we're gonna
was
see has 1 bed?
just about to say, I was literally just about to say that. There's 3 people in that room in 1 bed. That was my next sentence. I was like, it makes no sense.
Like, they don't know they don't sleep, only we know that.
Yeah. Like, damn.
Also, the fact that the woman was, like, so rude to them, it's like she's acting like they spread the disease on purpose. Like, these people were sick, and you're just
Yeah.
treating them like shit.
Only one of them was sick, and you would think that they would like, I mean, I get maybe Phoebe and Prue being together, but Piper being the initial carrier and them knowing for sure that she has it is like, well, why wouldn't you keep them separate? Like, you know that Piper had, you would think it'd be like the 2 of them in one ward and then Piper has her own room at least, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, it makes sense for plot's sake, but it's not logical.
it's not. Like, you wouldn't have a confirmed case with 2 potential cases
Exactly.
locked
Like
in a
it,
room
then you're
together.
just like, if you're thinking that this is airborne, then why are you having them more in contact? Like it's so dumb.
Yeah.
All right. So back in the isolation room, Dr. Williamson walks in and Phoebe's like, what, no mask? And he's like, no, I don't need it. None of us do. However, the disease is being spread. It's not airborne. I just ruled that out. And Piper says, great, then we're free to go. And he says, afraid not. Phoebe's like, you can't just keep us here. And he's like, actually, I can by law. And not just because your sister circumvented by opening the uninspected fruit, but because she's carrying a rare disease that has every possibility of spreading to epidemic proportions. And Prue says, I thought you said that it wasn't contagious. And the doctor says, Aurora fever isn't supposed to be contagious. And Phoebe says, well, maybe you misdiagnosed it. And he's like, I didn't. And aside from the fact that I have no idea how this disease is being spread, there's another little mystery that's concerning me. Your recovery makes no clinical sense. Your blood has no antibodies, which mean the immune system has never fought it off. By all medical standards, you should be dead right now, Miss Halliwell. And Piper's like, what's the matter, Doc? You don't believe in miracles? And he's like, not the kinds that don't leave traces, no. And the sisters all kind of look at each other, and he's like, I've got 6 people infected, and there's nothing I can do to save them unless I figure out how it is you survived. And he says that he's going to run all of their DNA and blood to see if there's something genetic that caused her to get better. And then he leaves the room, and Piper's wondering how 6 people got affected, and Prue's like, when we did the spell, we must have awakened everything in the room, including the disease. And Phoebe says, so do you think there's anything different in our blood because we're witches? Prue's like, I don't know, but our first priority is to figure out how to save these people. And Phoebe's like, yeah, but even if we can find a spell to save them, how do we prevent it from spreading to other people? And Piper's like, you have to reverse the spell. And they like tell her like, no, you could die. And she's like, I'm not gonna die, just reverse the spell and call Leo so he can heal me. And Phoebe's like, Leo, I thought you didn't want us to call Leo. She's like, well, yeah, that's when I thought I was sick, not dying. And then Prue tells her that they already called him. And besides, they don't know how the reversal spell, or they don't know the reversal spell, and they won't let them out to go get it. Piper says Prue can get it. Prue's like, no, I haven't controlled my powers. Like, I can't astral project on command yet. And Piper's like, you can learn to control it just like you learn to control your other power. Just concentrate. And she's like, I can't and I won't. And she's like, Prue, you have to try. We can't let anybody else die. And then Prue like closes her eyes and tries to astral project out of there.
So again,
So
crazy that they can just like lock them up indefinitely like this.
yeah, doesn't make any sense if it's not airborne. Really, like at this point, don't lock them up. Like keep them in a thing. Like there's really, I feel like there's still not really anything they could do because they can't prove that anything yet. But whatever. I guess it's for plot's sake.
Like you
Um,
also can't force people to like even if they had this like genetic marker that could help other people, you can't force people to donate their
yeah,
blood to save other people. That's not how medicine works.
no, it's completely like illegal. It doesn't work that way. It's not even how like blood. I mean, I guess maybe a little, but I don't know. It doesn't add up at all. And for her to like finally be like, oh, like just call Leo and everything.
Yeah, no, that part's a little sad to me. And also, I mean, like, I like their conversation here when they're like, no, we can't let other people die. Like, it doesn't matter if people find out we're witches, protecting
Yeah.
people, saving people comes first. Like, all of that is really makes sense and shows who they truly are as characters. So that all
Yeah, it
works for
shows their
me.
true character for sure.
So then we're at the manor in the attic, and Astral Prue appears and starts looking through the book. Then we go back to the isolation room, and a nurse looks in the window and asks what's wrong with Prue, and Phoebe says nothing, and she just leaves. Then we're back in the manor.
She's like, all right.
Like, okay. Then we're back at the manor, and Astral Prue is like memorizing the spell. Then we go to Nathan's room, and we see the ninja jump up onto Nathan's bed, and he's still asleep. Then we go back into the hospital room, and Prue comes back into her body, and Piper says, did you see it? Prue still doesn't want to answer, and she's like, we already discussed this. For some reason, there's no magical out for me, but there is for the others. Please. So Prue says the spell, and then her and Phoebe start repeating it with their hands on Piper's face and like kind of like holding her. And then in Nathan's room, we see the ninja stop being alive and fall to the floor just as Nathan wakes up. Then we go back to the hospital room where Piper passes out and Prue starts banging on the window for help. Dr. Williamson and a bunch of other doctors come running in and put her on the bed. They're like, you girls want to tell me what the hell is going on? And they start putting her on like monitors and a breath machine. And we see that her heart stops and he calls for a crash cart. And then Prue and Phoebe are both crying and they're like trying to do CPR.
Yeah, so very hectic, like instantly just dropped down, which I mean, it does make sense. She's very sick right now. I like that little like thing with the ninja where they have us kind of in suspense about what's happening to Nathan, like if Nathan's gonna get hit, and literally right as the ninja goes to stab him, like he falls to the ground. So that was like cool to me. Their reactions, their hesitancy makes sense to me. Piper's like characters showing like, no, we have to protect these people, like that comes first, is like it's very nice. Like you said, it shows their character, so I kind of like these little scenes here.
Yeah, me too. Like the pacing's really good, the back and forth editing, like it all works for me in that section.
Agreed. So now we are in the hospital still, and Dan comes running in the front door, and then he walks up to a desk where there's a woman on the phone, and he says, Piper Hallowell, what room is she in? And the woman puts her finger up, and he slams his hand on the desk, and he's like, no, what room is she in? Damn it, I'm family. Love it.
So hot. I was
I
like in
know.
love with Dan in that moment. I was like, yes,
Seriously. Fight
you
for
tell her.
her. Let her know. And then in the isolation room, nothing's working. He's calling for like things still, like the shock things and all of that. Dan runs in and sees what's happening from the doorway, and Phoebe and Prue are all crying. Piper's ghost like floats out of her body, and then she kind of like goes up into like heaven, I guess, just kind of like all white brightness. And Piper's looking at the sun, and then a man appears and walks towards her, and she's like Leo. And Leo comes up and he's like, hurry, take my hands. We don't have much time. And she says, am I dead? And he says, no, not yet. Not if you take my hands. She's like, I don't understand. And he says, it's the only way I can heal you, the only chance I have of them not finding out. Hurry. And then back in the isolation room, the doctor says, like, she's in defib, give me the paddles. And they shock her. And the sisters and Dan are all watching and like crying. And then in heaven, Leo is like, I don't want to lose you. And he takes her hands and they're glowing. And then back down in the isolation room, the monitor's going off, and like she's dead, and they call the time of death, and everyone's like devastated and crying, like, you know, the sisters and Dan, not the doctors. And up in heaven, Piper glows and like slowly fades back into her body. And in the isolation room, the machine starts beeping and there's a heartbeat. And the doctors are all shocked, and Piper like wakes up and says Leo's name. And Dan like hears this and looks super upset. And Prue and Phoebe run over to her. The nurse asks what happened, and the doctor's like, I don't know, but I'm gonna find out. Which
This
kind of leaves
doctor
us in
is so
suspense.
upset that his patient lived. Like,
I know, like Dr. Williamson wanted her to die so bad. Like so bad. For what?
maybe like Piper, like he has some secret vendetta against her and was just hoping for her to die the entire time.
I know, seriously, just preying on her downfall for no reason. Oh boy. But
But
I
like,
think that this worked well. I love that Leo came and like saved her, and him being like, I don't want to lose you, like too freaking cute. And her waking up and saying his name, like Dan hearing that, I know that shit had to shatter this man.
hmm
That sucks
and
for
like the,
Dan.
like breaking the rules for Piper once again,
Yeah,
soulmate shit.
I know. It's too cute. But that's what we mean, like we said, you know, like it, like they never had any plan to let her live.
No, literally, they like Leo's bosses were like, I don't care if she's charmed. That bitch is dying. She needs to
Yeah,
learn
no.
a lesson about opening illegal fruit.
Yeah. This is more important, all right? This is
Like, because
something.
as we're gonna see in a couple scenes, that's apparently the moral of the episode. Don't open illegal fruit. Like,
Yeah, I know. Like that was pretty much the entire like lesson learned in this episode. Gotta be more careful next time. Like,
don't skip customs with your fruit.
yeah. That's actually mad funny.
No,
Um,
but in all seriousness, like the pacing of this scene is really good.
yeah,
I love that Leo decides to save her despite the rules, and that now Dan thinks that she was thinking about Leo
right,
in like
right.
the moment of her death, which has to just be heartbreaking since, as we've seen time and time again, he's so jealous of like her past with Leo.
Yeah. Understandably, because Leo was still around and she obviously still acted like there was something there, but like,
Yeah.
you know, it sucks that now he kind of feels like that's confirmed.
So then we're at Buckland's and we see Prue is packing up all the stuff on her desk. And Jack walks in and he's like, I just heard. Are you out of your mind? Come on, Prue. You can't be serious. You can't quit. She says, I already did. I turned in my resignation and Caldwell accepted it. And he's like, why? Just because he doesn't agree with you about selling the Monet? She says, it's not authentic, Jack. And he says, you know what? Buyers think it is. And they've been thinking that way for over 100 years. She says, so it's worth whatever someone's willing to pay for it, right? And he says, yeah, right. She says, no, it's wrong. Or at least in my book, it is. And that's the way it used to be here before the takeover, before everyone cared about more about the sell than what they were selling. And he says, including me, right? She says, Jack, it's not just about the painting or Buckland's new philosophy. I've been thinking about this for a while. A lot has happened to me in the past year and a half. I've seen things that I never imagined existed, and it's changed me. It's made me want to make changes. He says, so what are you going to do? She says, I don't know. Just take some time, figure it out. Look, I had a little wake up call and I realized that life is way too short to be wasting my time doing something I really don't want to be doing. And he says, or being with someone you really don't want to be with. She says, Jack, you've been great. You've opened me up to so many new things, made me feel wanted again. And he says, and she says, but I need to be alone for a while. No strings. And she kisses him and then she leaves. Poor Jack, but bye, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, see ya. It didn't see, it kind of sucks that like his leaving didn't feel, that like didn't hit me that hard. I don't know.
No, it didn't hit me that hard either. But I will say, like, before we watched these episodes with Jack in them, when I thought back on the Jack and Prue relationship, I thought I would hate it a lot more than I did because I remember, like, really hating it for some reason. But I mean, Jack wasn't that bad. I
No, it
liked
wasn't.
having him around. He had his flaws, he had some good moments, he had some really uninteresting moments. But, in these last two episodes, I didn't have too much negative feelings towards Jack. Like, I wanted to see him grow more. I wanted more from him and Prue. I feel like
We
I
never
would
really
have been
got that.
interested to see like a little bit more before they got to this point of breaking up. But I also understand where Prue's coming from and that when she wants to do this start over, she wants it with every aspect of her life. And that means being single.
Which I totally understand, and I'm so happy for her making this call overall. Everything you said about Jack, I mean, I agree. I don't really have anything to add to that, but also with her leaving Bucklands, I think that's going to be a really great decision, or I mean, hopefully, like because I know we were literally saying how that's basically her whole life is like work and then fighting demons, and it shouldn't be that way, and I'm glad that she finally sees that and finally did something about it, and I can't wait to see where it takes her from here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to find out what's next for Prue, career wise and personal life wise. I'm excited that she's making some changes, and I hope these changes are going to make her happier,
Yeah,
and less stressed and more able to focus on things that make her happy and kind of bring her back to the joy in life that I think she lost a lot of when Andy died.
agreed. Yeah. So then we move on to the final scene of the episode, and we are at P3 per usual. And someone brings Piper a box of fruit, and she's like, these haven't been inspected yet. We're returning them to the supplier. And Prue and Phoebe approach, and Phoebe's like, looks like someone learned their lesson. And she
Like, why is the major lesson of the episode like don't get illegal fruit? Like,
yeah,
was
like
there a big illegal fruit problem in
I
2000
know
that I don't know about?
these people were pissed off about the fruit. They were like, if we're gonna bring anything to this show, it's gotta be all these fruit inspections that go awry.
Like, there's so much fruit smuggling going on in this fucking country, and we need to put an end to it now.
Needs to be done. Oh my god. So Phoebe says, looks like somebody learned their lesson, and she's like, yeah, the hard way, unfortunately. She's like, the club is doing okay though, and but Piper says that's because she got rid of the cover and has been giving out free drinks. And then Piper's like, have you guys seen Dan around? And they're both like, no, why? And she's like, oh, I just thought he might stop by. And Phoebe's like, Piper, Dan heard you call Leo's name when you were coming around in the hospital. She's like, he did? That wasn't me thinking about Leo. That was just, and Phoebe's like, him saving you. I know. And Prue's like, still, how are you going to explain that to Dan? Phoebe says, at least you're alive to try. That's what's important. And Prue's like, I mean, just because we're witches doesn't mean we're above the laws of nature. Phoebe's like, or the Wiccan ones. Piper's like, I know. You don't need to tell me twice. I'm not taking anything for granted anymore. And Prue says ditto, and Phoebe's like, yeah, Prue, welcome to the ranks of the unemployed. And she puts her arm around her. And she says, I'm proud of you. I think that what you did was very brave. And Prue says, thank you.
So, like we were joking, all about the illegal fruit.
Yeah.
In all seriousness, I mean, I like the little wrap up here, the worry about Dan, which I think will obviously come up next episode, I'm assuming. And then Piper's explanation. And of course, this idea that now Prue's starting over and
Yeah.
Phoebe's happy for her. And so is Piper, I think. And the club is going to be okay.
yeah, everything kind of wraps up pretty well. I mean, the only thing that we're kind of left on there is the whole Dan thing with Leo in the hospital. But aside from that, everything like concluded very nicely, and I like the little wrap up there too.
Yeah. So then we're at the other side of the club and we see Leo walking down the stairs. Prue spots him and points him out to Piper. Phoebe says to tell him thanks for us too. Piper walks over and is like, hey. And he says, hey, how are you feeling? She says, okay, a little tired, which is actually a good thing. Leo, thank you for everything you. And he says, I couldn't let you die, Piper. She says, I'm very glad you couldn't. Did you get in trouble? He says, yeah, actually, a lot. They found out what I did. They clipped my wings. She says, what? He says, it's not permanent. It's more like a suspension, I hope. She says, Leo, I don't know what to say. He says, you don't have to say anything. You didn't do anything. I did. I guess in the back of my head, I always thought that someday, somehow, you and I would get a second chance. She says, I'm with Dan now, and he says, I know. But I also know that now that I'm mortal, I'm going to fight for you. May the best man win. And Piper kind of smiles, but looks down.
Oh my god.
May
Oh
the
my,
best man win indeed.
yo, that, first of all, so fucking sexy. Absolutely love that. So hot. Second of all, shit is about to go down. Like, that's crazy. I wish I was in Piper's position. Two really hot, great guys love me so much. Like, what?
Literally, like a literal angel just became immortal to be with you.
Yeah, like
Like, damn,
literally,
Piper.
like she really got it like that.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love it. I'm so excited for this like little competition or whatever is about to happen now because Leo obviously is like, I'm not giving up on us. And
Yeah, like we've kind of been calling it a love triangle all season, and I think it's finally going to get real love triangle-y in the next few episodes, and I'm excited.
oh yeah, I'm just very excited to see how things play out from here. Like so excited.
Me too. Like, I can't believe Leo's mortal. I mean, obviously, I knew it was coming, so that's a lie, but like, I am so happy that we finally got to that point, and I cannot wait to see where things are going and talk more about it.
Me too. Like you said, can't wait. I'm so happy he's mortal now. I wasn't expecting that, but I guess in a way, like that's another thing I'm wondering, like, is that also destiny? Like it was meant to turn out this way so that they could like be mortal together. Like, you know what I mean? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm wondering that too. Like, I'm like, because, Leo's bosses don't want Piper and Leo together. But then is the reason all this had to happen because Destiny wanted to bring them back together? Like, that's a question I'm going to have. And like, once we see where things go with this plot line with the love triangle, I think we can discuss it more and more once we get ideas. And I will continue to have questions about that over the next few episodes.
Me too. I will definitely too. Overall, this was such a strong episode. Like I've always considered it an episode like one of my favorites. Like I really always loved this episode, but looking into it now, going over it, like I didn't realize how much of the little things like changed, like Prue leaving her job and starting on her own, and Piper getting reintroduced to Leo like this again. Like it was really really good, and I'm so excited to you know like I was really excited to talk about this one. I was.
Yeah. I've always thought of this as an important episode. I've never thought of it as a favorite, but I did really, really enjoy it. And like, I always thought of it as important because of Leo obviously getting his wings
Mhm.
clipped. But I see even more important plot points now that we've discussed them all. And like, this episode is just a really good mid-season episode that is leading us into what I'm assuming is going to be storylines that'll carry on for most of the remainder of the season, if not all of the remainder.
Yeah, I never realized that this episode specifically gave us a lot of future storylines, like Phoebe starting college, Prue
Mm-hmm.
leaving her job and ending it with Jack, and then Piper getting Leo get like there's those are like important things in each of their lives that we're gonna. I mean, whether you watch the show or not, obviously that's gonna cause a lot of changes, and I'm really like excited. I never realized that it's all started from this episode.
Yeah, me either. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. If you want to reach out to us or follow us on social media, we're on Instagram and TikTok at rewitched_pod. You can also send us an email to rewitched.pod@gmail.com. And join us back next time for Season 2, Episode 13, Animal Pragmatism.